SJ, welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. SJ, Stongo, Gary Fife, Jaho Jeff Kados, Tonkon, Chukayetdika, Mogi. Today we have pretty much what we'll call our Joy Harjo show. Recently, Ms. Harjo was announced as the U.S. Poet Laureate, an honor that's incredible, that we wish her the best. I had a chance to get squeezed in between all of her other media commitments, and we had an interesting talk about the new job and what she feels is important in the field of poetry and representing Native Americans. So let's get this thing fired up here, and we'll listen to a phone interview I did just the other day, so hang in there. This is kind of an overwhelming new, and you've got an incredible list of accomplishments here, but this, where does this rank among the things you've done there?
Well, it just depends on what you're looking at, because yes, this is as far as in the poetry world, in the world, in the creative world in which I've been working for many, many years. This definitely tops. This definitely tops it all.
Well,
and,
go ahead.
Oh, and then there's and then my children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. I even have great grandchildren. That also tops it all too.
I can imagine now. I guess let's just start with what were your feelings when you found out this honor was going to be bestowed on?
Well, it was a surprise for one, and I got a call from Rob at the Library of Congress, and I know him because he organizes the National Book Fair, etc. And he said, "I need. Can you call about such and such a time? I just have a really quick question." And so I thought, okay, And then I called, and they said, "We have you on speakerphone, and this is Carla Hayden, the Librarian of Congress." And she says, would you be our 23rd U.S. Poet Laureate? And I'm stunned. I mean, I'm still stunned. It's still, I was told May 2nd, and I'm still kind of feeling this out, and I really had now that I'm in the middle of the first part of it, I had no idea, really, the scope of it, but it gives a great opportunity to represent for Mvskoke Creek Nation. It opens the door for our young people to say, wait, we can do this. We're, this is us too. And, it does it for Indian country and for, young poets and writers all over, young poets who are coming up, or young people who want to be poets and think, I would hope that it gives them some kind of, this appointment will help them, will inspire them to just keep moving.
Was it difficult for you to, I guess, self-embargo this announcement? You said they called you on May the 2nd, so that's May and a good chunk of June there. So was it kind of hard?
It was in some ways, and in some ways not. I got to hold off on it and just kind of be with the idea for a little while. And but it was a relief to. The announcement was a relief. But I'm in the midst of, this. I guess what's really struck me is by how many people are really happy about it, and these are usually people, they've seen me people have seen me. I've grown up in the public, basically. I started writing when I was in my 20s with 2 young children at home. I was pretty much a single mother, and came up through, I grew up here in Tulsa, and yet went away to Indian boarding school. It was an art school, and came back and had my son in Tahlequah, W.W. Hastings. We lived on nothing, went back and, had a daughter and went to school with the tribe helped me with money for school, and I'm always appreciative of that. And, it's been a long, long, long road, and a lot of it's been a challenge because, when you're coming up as a young poet, you get a lot of doors slammed in your face. You get turned down. I mean, I got turned down for a grant the other day. That still happens. You just can't let it. You just have to keep moving. But I guess what I'm trying to say that is along the way I've met so many people, and so many people have helped out. So many people have, driven me to the airport, picked me up, made sure I was okay. I've had students, friends. It's quite a broad circle, a wide circle, and I've probably been to almost every tribal nation in the country at some point or the other in my almost, over 40 years of doing this. So I like to think it's all of us at this award. It has to do with this awarding or honor. I guess I should say an honor. This honoring is really about, it takes in all of us.
You've opened quite a door there, and you've mentioned the tribe and its support, and meeting Native people from across the nation, and traveled and gained support internationally too. Now, all in all, as you stop and look at it, first of all, what do you think about this kind of heavy responsibility in representing pretty much all of Native America?
Well, it is a heavy responsibility, and as I've always said, because through the years, I've been in positions where I'm expected to represent everybody, and it's like, ultimately, you can't represent everybody. You can do the best you can to make sure that everyone has a voice.
And for Mvskoke Creek people, culture and history in your life, what kind of part did that play in, you think, in achieving this pinnacle?
Okay, can you ask me again?
Yeah, you're a Creek woman, and knowing Creek culture and people, and I presume some language. What kind of part did that play? Was it really important? Did it give you inspiration or direction, do you think?
Well, it's part of who I am, and I don't really I'm not self-conscious about it. It's just part of who I am, and I find Mvskokeness weaving throughout everything I do, and through all the poems, imagery, and meaning, and so on. And it's always, it's always just me, and I'm part of the people, and I've been always inspired by our people and the stories and the songs and who we are and our history and how we keep moving, and that's always been a part of me.
And as you move into this incredible position, what does it, I guess, do to the world of poetry and the structure in place? I mean, you feel like you're kind of shaking some foundations by adding this Native American flavor, so to speak?
Well, the point has always been that we are the original American poets, so to speak. There's an incredible diversity of indigenous nations and indigenous nations poetry, and we form the foundation. And then layered on top and through are all of these immigrant nations, and all of that makes what you would call an American poetry. But we are essential to anything called American, whether it's American history, economics, anything. It starts with indigenous peoples and our contributions.
What is the job of a poet laureate? Have you had a chance to kind of examine that job, so to speak, and what will be asked of you?
Yeah, I guess I needed the job description first before saying yes. It's basically an honorary position, and I have an office there in D.C. But I'm living in Tulsa. I'll stay here, but go there once in a while. And but there are a lot of different. September 19th there'll be a big opening reading, and I'm excited that there's a group from Haskell already coming up, and a lot of other people. And you don't have to pay. There's no ticket cost. Anybody can come. So that's the first thing I do. And then if I do a second term, which is most likely, then I'll develop a project, and I'm working on that now. That will a national project, which of course in that project I want to highlight indigenous nations poets, but find a way for all of us to talk. Poetry teaches you how to listen, so it can be a way for us to talk across national, international, cultural dividing lines.
Well, when you speak of those lines and distinctions, I noticed over the past week or so that many of those distinctions have fallen by the side. I think this story about you and this poet laureate position has made more headlines, I think, than darn near any other Native story, except going back to Standing Rock and Dapple. I've seen it in AP. Of course, the networks have been using it, and I'm presuming NPR and others are standing in line, waiting to talk with you. So you've made quite an impression there. So what's, I guess, the message that you want to get across and take advantage of this spotlight?
Well, I need to be quiet for a while and just look and kind of survey. But what's important is this country, this earth, this place that is our home, this place that is us, because we're not separate from this earth. We're in need of healing. We're all in need of healing. There's been, certainly from history, but from history, from, we're in need of, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, I love our young people. I watch them. I've got grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and what I was told by those people who know things is that they're all our children. And I look at this world that we're in right now. It's so divisive. It's so much hate-mongering, and it hurts. It's hurting the children, and it's hurting the young. It's hurting us. And so, if I would like to see how I could be useful with this platform and with poetry, because with poetry and how poetry can be useful in moving us along towards compassion and understanding.
This direction that you've taken all your life, was it really something that you set out to do when you began this creative trick? Say, oh boy, I want to be a poet and really be famous. But all the stories of poets that I've ever seen have been, those kinds of things of hardship and acceptance. You're not going to get rich being a poet, most likely. And so, was that ever part of your thinking there? It's like, I guess going back to the initial question, I want to be a poet.
If I wanted to be famous, I certainly wouldn't be a poet. Or if I went into poetry, I don't even feel like I chose to go into poetry. I've always felt those people, our ancestors, I've always felt them close to me ever since I was a very small child. And they've always protected me, and they do, all of us. Nothing special. We all have them with us. And even when I would go the wrong way, and they would always knew when I was making the wrong direction, and I went through a lot of hardship and a lot of it my own doing. it was poetry that helped me out. And at one point, I was poised to become an artist like my Aunt Lois Harjo and my grandmother Naomi Harjo. And I liked painting and I liked doing art, and I didn't have to talk to people because I was very, very shy. But there was something, I remember I was going through a lot of hardship. I was a young mother. I was going through domestic violence. I was suicidal, and I didn't know how I would keep going. And they basically handed me a pen and said, kept me from, said, we will show you the way, but you have to listen. So for me, poetry is a way to sit and be quiet and listen. And so then I listen, but poetry is like any other art. You don't just write something down and there it is. You work on it. There's a process, there's challenge. Sometimes a poem might take a year to write. Other poems might take 6 months, some 3 months. But it's been quite a teacher for me. But no, I didn't set out to be a poet. I wanted to be an artist. And then the poetry came on me, and it's like, this doesn't make sense. I didn't plan to be a poet, and yet that's, at some point, it was given to me to do, and I just had to do it. I wanted to make a living because I have children, and I often taught to make a living. And, the book sales, even if your name's out there, you can't live on book sales or CD sales. But you just do it because it was given to you to do. And I have, I've been given poems that I had no idea, I just knew that they came from that place where the people loved us. And so I feel like I've just been taking care of them. I call myself the nails and hammer person, and I'm given sometimes this startling and sometimes beautiful language, and I try to lay it out. It's, sort of like making a ribbon skirt. I've been making some of those lately. It's like you're given this beautiful materials and these words, and then I just construct them in a way that might go on and help some other young person like I was, who looked at the mess we're in and thought, I don't know if I can make it through.
Let me ask you about that inspiration. I read a lot of your work now, and your autobiographical piece, and listened to that rowdy saxophone of yours. You have so many directions. What is it that inspires you to create?
A lot of it has to do with, I think, beauty and healing, the need to help and to just inspire. I mean, I think we all get inspired by sunrise, by certain smells. I love the sound of all those insects. I love being up, watching the sky, the stars and the sky move when we're up dancing all night, and being with everyone, and the sound of, there's just so much that inspires us. And we all get inspired, but I think it would be helpful if everyone, you write little notes down so you remember. It's kind of what poems can be too. It's like, sometimes it's like a kind of spiritual note-taking of things that strike you, and so that you want to remember them, or sometimes it's like that. Sometimes not. Sometimes you see something else that is hard to write about, but somehow by doing it, you help others.
I was going to ask you about the things that are, as you said, hard to write about. There, much of your work deals with some painful and very introspective kinds of things. So by expressing them creatively, is that sort of a release? Is it a way, a therapy, if you will?
It can be. It's not pure therapy because I'm making art. There's a lot of stuff I write that nobody ever sees. It's just that, that stuff just for getting stuff out. I think it's helpful, because then you can stop. You can get angry, you can get upset, but then you can stop. Once you get it out, then you can stop and say, okay, let's just take a breath here, and now I've dealt with that energy, and let's see where we can go. Is there a way to go that can be constructive? that won't hurt anybody. I don't want to cause any pain, yet sometimes it's painful to see the truth.
I think a lot of people who are familiar with your work would quickly agree with you and find a way that to share that release, perhaps. Now let's look at the sunny side of that question. Is it fun? I mean, are there times when you just get a real kick out of putting something down or putting it together? Just kind of make you smile and laugh and enjoy what you do?
Of course, even in the midst of all that, even when I'm writing about challenge, there's so much excitement in using language. But I think one of the funnest things I ever did was a song called the Had It Up to Year Round Dance Song. I decided to do this kind of round dance song of a couple arguing at a dance. And so I brought Charlie Hill. I lived in LA for a little while, and there's a period I was running into him everywhere. We'd run into each other in the street, and we became really good friends. And so I got this idea for a song, and I scripted some of it. And I brought him into the studio, and we started recording. And then, he's a comedian. He's very funny, and he started ad-libbing, and then I ad-libbed with him, and we had such a good time. And it made a really fun song. And now I'm glad I have that because he's not with us anymore.
Right, and even I understand when he was in a hospital, he was still cracking jokes and breaking people up. So,
yeah.
Now, the position of Poet Laureate, I presume would have to deal with requests from whoever. The events that happen in the nation, important personal kinds of things that happen to Americans. Are you looking at having to produce, so to speak, to meet these kind of requests?
There's been all kinds of requests pouring in, and then I've heard from people that I've known through the years, and people I don't remember knowing through the years, but it's been quite an outpouring. There's some events from the Poet Laureate office, and then there's other events. I'll be doing what I've always done too at the same time, which is I have my usual events of going to schools, going to music festivals or poetry festivals, and presenting poetry and music, or one or the other, and I've been doing that for years, and I'll continue doing that. And then I have this new book, An American Sunrise, coming out, and I just had a book out, a play called Wings of Night Sky, Wings of Morning Light, and I'm working on a musical project. And so I'm going to do what I've always done, but added will be this responsibility, and also I'll be thinking about a project that will benefit us and help move us forward, and I especially think of those young people, those teens out there who are really struggling to find meaning.
What kind of reaction have you gotten from the American public so far? I know it's only been a short time since the announcement's been out, but you mentioned you've gotten a lot of requests. I think that's wonderful. But, are they saying, hey, we finally got an Indian in there, or it's about time another minority was served, this kind of thing? Or are people really genuinely curious about who you are and what you'll be doing?
I think it's a mix, but there's a lot of, I've been out here for a long time, and so I've been really overwhelmed by a lot of people who said they've been crying because a lot of people have known, I guess, particularly the struggle of Native poets to even get a place at the table. And for the most part, we kind of go along and we do what we do. And I think with Standing Rock really was major in opening up this story, because here in the middle of the country, there was, the earth crisis came to a head right in the middle of country and right in the middle of Indian country, of course, and so that brought Native country into focus, and so this, I think, kind of builds on it, and people are really, people are excited, and I am too. I mean, I'm excited too because I feel that this is a great opportunity, not just for me, but for all of us to say, well, here we are, and we're part of, we're here. That Illuminative, and I don't know if you've talked to Crystal Echohawk and Illuminative people, but they're doing great work of, providing data that shows that, well, a lot of Americans think that natives they think that we're dead, for one thing, or they think that we're not really human beings.
Right, I found that they know more about our dead ancestors than they do the tribe living down the road.
Yeah. I had an assistant, a wonderful young assistant, when I taught at UTK, and he realized he lived next door to a tribe in Michigan, and nobody knew each other.
That's so true all over the country.
It is, and I would like to open that up,
Well, you have an interesting and wonderful opportunity there. What is, I guess, the message then that you might want to give the rest of the United States?
Message? Oh my gosh. Well, I think poetry is about, it's the art. Poetry is really the art of listening. And we all need to, and you can't listen if you're talking or yelling at someone else or calling somebody racist insults, or you can't listen. If you got earbuds in all the time, or you're constantly, enthralled with your phone, or we need to stop and listen.
Right. I've heard you use that phrase when I've had the opportunity to talk with you. What is it that maybe you want to hear from Native America, if there is a message coming to you, so to speak?
What I love, we're so diverse. Even in our families, we're diverse. There's so many stories that, our stories are so complicated and incredible and hilarious and disturbing and full of details that go way beyond, the stereotypes are just these flat images that aren't full of life, and we have stories of life that connect us. I think we need to hear those to make the connections with each other.
Right. Now, I guess final question, if there was some word, some thought you might want to leave with Mvskoke Creek people who will hear this, and my friends online who have been asking about it, what would you want to say with them? How would you want them to think of this particular legacy, so to speak?
Well, I think that that we all need to pay attention to our words. I mean, poetry is an art that involves using words. And words can destroy or they can heal. And in our nation, we've got so much, there's so much work we have to do to, for all of us, for our generations. We have so much to do. We got so much to do. We should focus on moving forward together instead of, tearing each other down or all the stuff that can go on in a close-knit community that's we are a big family. We're all related. Anybody you come across, and we need to remember that, we're here to lift each other up, and that's what I was always told. That's one thing I've always heard with my relatives and those people. I so miss all these people that are leaving us. It's so hard. That's the hardest thing about getting older, and we miss them, and that's the one thing. So we have their legacy, and my poetry would not be where it is without the legacy of those people who were my teachers. And for one, they were always funny. They didn't judge people. They were always funny, and they always had a way of seeing things in which, we all come out okay in the end. And that's what I would like our people to remember, and myself. I always try to remember, but and we need to come together and move forward in that way.
Thank you so much, Joy Harjo. You make us so proud. Good luck with everything you do there, and keep us in mind, and let's see what the new U.S. Poet Laureate produces there. Mado.
Okay, Mado, thank you.
Joy Harjo speaking with me actually just yesterday on the anniversary of the Little Bighorn, kind of poignant day. Now, in 2014, Joy Harjo was named to the Oklahoma Writers Hall of Fame, and I attended that particular event and had a chance to chat with her again in between the demands of the other media and well-wishers. But here's a little bit of our discussion there at the Oklahoma Writers Hall of Fame. We see from Oklahoma State University you've got another honor added to your collection there. And I took a look at your bio, and that's quite a pedigree you have there. But this one comes from the state of Oklahoma State University, and this one is an honor that comes from real close to home. So how do you feel about that?
Well, that always matters a lot when something comes from home, because as you know, it doesn't always happen, and so it's when these honors come, I feel I appreciate them, but I feel like it's not just for me, but it's from where the work comes from, which is I was born here, and I came home, and this place has a lot to do with who I am and where I'm going.
Well, that was a question I wanted to ask. Oklahoma is kind of unique in the nation, and not having reservations like many of the other states do, and more interaction, I would say, between its population, and of course the geography is kind of flat rolling plains with some greenery on one side and hot dusty land on the west part. How does being here in Oklahoma affect you and your work, you think?
Well, that's a good question, and I may have to think about that for a while. I think it's going to be good for my next, one of my next books, which will be a memoir about indigenous rights movements in my family and just, coming up through that kind of culture. And so being here, I think, will be very helpful, because I fled from Oklahoma as a young Native person, and I was somewhat familiar with the history. And that was in the late 60s. I went to Indian boarding school in Santa Fe, and it was there at, Indian boarding school with a lot of Native artists from here, too. The Five Sisters were there, Azores, and Sandy, and, it was a time of coming together of young Native artists from all over, and we were all coming with the same kinds of questions about the importance of art, where our arts come from, our arts being specifically tribally based, and yet we're out there in the larger world, and how does all of that come together? And and all the questions about history, were there in our lives and in our struggles. So coming back, so I feel like I've gone out into the world, and I've been a lot of places and met with Native peoples and been taken good care of by other Native peoples all over the world even. And so to come back here and begin that other work, the work of this part of my life, it's almost poetic justice in a way.
Let me ask you this. As a young person, a young young Native American people, many of us were fascinated and instigated, if you will, by the rise of the Native activist portion of the civil rights movement here in our nation. Things like the occupation of Alcatraz, and then the National Indian Youth Council, and of course the American Indian Movement, and some others. How did that affect you and what you did as an artist?
Well, that's how the poetry came into being. I was going to school. I had to apply to get into the Institute of American Indian Arts when it was mainly a high school, and I applied with art. I used to draw, and I got into painting, and got into UNM actually in pre-med. In second semester, I was back in art again. But it was being part of the Kiva Club, which was a major, it was a Native student club at the University of New Mexico, but it became a major place of it became a very political club, and a club about human rights, basically, and Native rights. And so my poetry came directly out of that. I started writing poetry in response to the injustices I was seeing and experiencing in Indian country. And that's how the writing started, because I had no plans to be a writer. I was not a good speaker. I still don't necessarily think of myself as a great speaker. It came out of the need to address these things in the way that, for me, only words could, and I had to learn to use words for many reasons. It was not my first inclination, but that's how the writing came about.
A bit of the pen is mightier than the sword?
Probably. Yeah, most likely. Because in most cultures in the world, poetry and songs, they've been behind empowerment, and also bringing to the surface emerging ideas and new thoughts that we all need to keep going and to refresh ourselves and our cultures.
Why is it, I think, let me ask it this way. Why is it important for the state of Oklahoma to make recognition of yourself and other Native artists? Why is that so important?
Well, this is Indian country. It's Indian country, and Oklahoma, of course, has a lot of. For me, this is one of the. It's interesting. It's one of the most difficult places to live because of the history here, and it's not something that happened a long time ago. Those settler Native politics are still going on. It's like it's still nothing. I don't want to say nothing has changed, because there's always change going on, but sometimes it feels like nothing has changed. And I find it to be, in one way, one of the most racist places in the country, but at the same time, it's also one of the most inspiring. I think what's made me, one of the things that's made me happiest in this world, and it's probably the best gift I could give my children and grandchildren, is coming back here, is returning home. And I mean, I've always returned home constantly through the years, but to come back here, I needed to come back and, and return the gifts that I developed that were not mine. They were given to me to take care of. I had to bring them back home. And so there. I was trying to remember the question where we started out.
That's okay. I find myself doing that a lot sometimes, too. Taking one more step in that kind of general direction, do you think that the lack of reservation borders makes a difference for Indian people here as opposed to, say, South Dakota or Wisconsin or Washington?
Probably. I think so. I mean, it's important, I think, to have, a place that is your place. So I tend to think of all of Oklahoma as Indian country. But then when I think of my own tribe or our tribe, I always think, well, it's not just here, but it's, I always think of Georgia, Alabama, parts of Florida, all of that. It's really, there are really no borders. I mean, it's I guess we've come to think of, in the American imagination and the mind, it's like you're only native if you have a reservation. And that becomes the marking point, or the point of being a legitimate native person is if you have, or a legitimate native nation if you have a reservation. And, but let's see where I'm going with this. But actually, there are really, I like thinking about, I like listening to people who know things. And I've heard some of the people who know things in the tribe say, well, we're really not Creek or Mvskoke Creek. We really are tribal towns. And even beyond that, we're our clans. And, and there's no distance really between, say, for instance, Ojiabova or Hickory Ground and, our original grounds over in what's now called Wetumpka, Alabama. That it's one energetic place of being.
You seem to be in constant motion, and it's hard to keep up with you. Maybe you could fill us in a little bit about what you've been up to lately.
Well, I've been finishing up a project. Finishing up one phase of it, and we'll see what happens with it. I just wrote a play, a musical, and sent that off into the world, and we'll see. It's the first draft, and the thing I've learned about these things, they take many, many drafts, and I'm just starting to work on the music for it. And so mostly I've done some traveling and went to actually Medellin, Colombia, for an international poetry festival. The focus was indigenous peoples, and so it was wonderful to see some indigenous poets that I've met and performed with from Colombia before, and to meet people again from all over the world, and to see such a huge audience for poetry, because it's really soul music. It's really like the soul talk of all of us. So that was the largest trip, and mostly I've been around here working and, helping out with family and doing stuff around here, but and working and writing, and I have a new book of poetry coming out from Norton in the next fall, and starting on my next memoir. So mostly I've been around here quite a bit. I like to hang out with the people.
Kind of a nice chance to kind of slow down a bit and enjoy home, then.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to give a final word of advice to young people, young Native people who are considering, following in your footsteps, whether it be the serious writing that you do in poetry or fiction and nonfiction, if you would, or even expressing themselves in music, what would you say about encouraging their creative spirits?
It's important because I've almost given up. I've almost given up several times because it's not easy. I think any path we take in this world as human beings, whether it's being a cook or or anything else, or writing, it's not. It's important to always do your best in whatever you do. Always do your best. Be kind to people and be kind to yourself, and also take time, unhook from all these devices. I realized I wasn't reading or listening. All of it's about listening and stopping and listening. And that's what writing is, basically. It's basically stopping and listening with stories and listening to music and poetry and just listening to what's going on in the wind and the trees and people. It's important to be around people who know more than you do. That was one of the best pieces of advice I got when I started playing music. And I didn't start playing music till I was about 40, was play with people better than you. So you put yourself in places where if you're an activist, then you go around the activists who know, who are going about things in the right way. If you want to learn to play saxophone, and you get yourself in the saxophone music culture, whatever music you're in, and try and put your, it's important to take risks. I guess that's another thing. And I've taken many risks, and I have fallen hard several times. But I guess the other piece of advice is you get back up and keep moving.
Well, it looks like it certainly has paid off. We wish you continued success in that career. Look forward to seeing your next publication. And it'd be nice to cross trails with you sometime, sit down and have a glass of iced tea or something like that.
That would be great.
All right. Thank you very much, Joy Harjo. We appreciate you so much. And congratulations on your latest Hall of Fame honor there.
Well, thank you, Meadow, for all you do, too, because you've been at it for quite a while, too.
Joy Harjo in 2014 talking about her work and the Oklahoma Hall of Fame induction, where we had a chance to chat with her. Now, in the earlier interview, she spoke about her music, and particularly at least one piece called Had It Up to Here with the late comedian, Oneida comedian Charlie Hill. We're going to share some of her music here to wrap up our show. And if you've got a good pair of ears, hopefully you'll be able to tell Charlie Hill. So let me get the thing fired up here, and we'll be listening to Had It Up to Here.
And her high-heeled shoes and her skirt up to here and her blonde hair down to there. When you dance right past with her, it gives me the blues. You have the sweetest step in double time. It's just not fair. But how can I tell you that I love you when you don't even care?
Your boyfriend and his white man ways. You hold him in your shawl. It makes me crazed. I like the way you step so high beside me. But how can I tell you, babe, you don't talk to me. Where I, oh. dance, you'd step so high. We used to come to this place all the time because everybody knew you. Now it seems like too many people know you here. Now, how can I tell you these things? You don't even talk to me anymore. You don't even call me up anymore. You don't even look at me anymore. You don't even see me anymore. But if you come close to me, I'll tell you how much I love you, honey. How much I love you, honey.
I don't like your girlfriend.
But
I never liked any of your girlfriends.
But
None of them. Not your Sue, not your Comanche sweetheart, not your Shining Shoshone, not your Get Down Dene,
but look.
not your too fast girlfriend with her up to here and her down to there and her here down to everywhere. You know, it looks bad on me.
are you done?
Do this to me.
Jeez.
Come close to me, honey, hey, yeah.
If you come close to me, honey,
I will have to tell you.
I will have to tell you
How much I love you.
how much I love you. Are you done? Jeez.
Too much.
Went out for a couple of drinks and
Party.
a couple of smokes.
Not enough.
Didn't mean anything.
Rent.
I mean.
Not enough.
I woke up on the floor with her
Uptime. Too
arms
much.
around her, but she
Downtime. Too much.
passed out, and I was just trying to see if she was
Downtown.
still breathing. But
Run around.
you read things into it.
Man.
two selections from Joy Harjo's various CDs. The first one was called Had It Up to Here, and if you are listening, you probably could tell that that was the Oneida comedian Charlie Hill working with her on that particular tune. The second one was called Rainbow Gratitude in 2010. That was from the album Red Dreams by Joy Harjo, and marvelous tune. You got to hear some of her famous saxophone on that one. Okay, we're about out of time, but I got a couple of things we can share real quick if I can find which stack I put them in. The 2019 Hope Conference is coming up August 21st and the 22nd. That's at the River Spirit Casino Resort in Tulsa. You can make a difference to help prevent suicide in our community. Session topics include survivors of suicide, building resilience in Native communities, substance abuse, veteran suicide, ethics, self-care, LGBTQ to spirit. So if you want to check that one out, then you want more information, get a hold of the Mvskoke Creek Nation Behavioral Health Prevention Programs. That's at 918-758-1930. Okay, that's again the August 21st and 22nd at River Spirit, the Hope Conference. And you might want to check these folks out here at the Conservation District. They say there was free vegetable and flower seeds. Now, I'm not sure where we are in the planting season, but if you want to give it a shot and try and get some flowers and vegetables, give them a call. Mvskoke Creek Nation Natural Resource Conservation District. That's at 918-549-2609. That's it for me. We'll catch you next week here on Mvskoke Radio. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. But